And I'm going to share my screen. And let's see here. There we go. We are excited to share information about our grant program. We've been funded by the U.S. Department of Energy and some local foundations. And so we're going to go through some information this morning, and we'll make sure and leave time for questions. And if you do have questions, we have a smaller group this morning, but it might be good to put them in the chat, and we'll make sure and answer them. Here are the things we're going to try and cover this morning. Want to give you an overview of the program and the requirements. We want to talk a bit about our selection process, the grant timeline, the application form, and the questions that we're asking for information from you about so we're going to talk about both the selection process and the selection criteria, and then we want to leave time for questions. The U.S. Department of Energy, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, has been provided with significant funding to address clean energy and sustainable infrastructure. And part of that is funding to support their Renew America's program. They have two elements. One is to support nonprofit organizations, and the other is to support schools. And so we have been funded by the Renew America's nonprofits. We're one of 9 grantees nationally. And so the purpose of that program is really to reduce carbon emissions, improve health and safety for people in our community, and to lower utility costs for buildings that are owned and operated by 501c3 organizations. It is part of the White House's Justice 40 initiative, and so 60% of the funds we're hopeful that we can dedicate them to serving organizations that support disadvantaged populations. I want to kind of take this opportunity to introduce our partners and the roles that they'll be playing in this program, and some of our folks are on the call this morning. Mid-America Regional Council is serving as the lead grantee for the program. We have a 501c3, and we applied through that designation. We have Community Capital Fund, which is a community organization, and I'm not sure if Andrew is on the call.
Yes, I'm here, Marlene.
Hi, Andrew. Good morning. And Andrew and his team have been helping us first to identify nonprofit organizations, as we have done some outreach to try and make organizations aware of the program. And then I'll talk a little bit about our community advisory board that's going to help us with the selection of the nonprofits that we're able to assist. And Andrew and his team helped us in inviting individuals from the community to participate. And then he and others from Community Capital Fund will be involved in that selection process. We are pleased to be working with Climate Action KC, which is a regional organization dedicated to addressing climate resiliency in the greater Kansas City area. And they have a program called the Building Energy Exchange. KC and Ashley Sadowski is with us this morning. She's actually a member of the MARC staff that's assigned to work for Climate Action KC on the Building Energy Exchange. And so we're excited to have her expertise as part of our team. Metropolitan Energy Center, I think most of you might know that organization. They do a lot of good work in helping to promote energy conservation and the use of renewables in the region. And they're going to be assisting us, particularly as we help nonprofits set benchmarks about understanding their energy use and ways that they might reduce it. And then as part of our application process, we pre-qualified 2 engineering firms, Custom Engineering and Integrity Energy Partners. And I don't know if Joe Davis from Custom Engineering or Brian Little from Integrity are on the call today, but they're going to be helping us as we work with nonprofits to evaluate potential projects for energy savings. And then finally, United Way of Greater Kansas City is always a great partner in helping us with identifying nonprofits that could benefit from this program. I also on the call this morning is Beth Dawson, who is a senior principal planner with Mark and has a background in both solar and in land use and transportation architecture, and she's going to be assisting with this program. And Catherine Couch, who's helping us with the webinar today, is part of our public affairs team, and she'll also be supporting our work. A little bit about the program requirements. The Department of Energy has certain requirements that we're going to need to meet. One is that the buildings that we support have to be owned by a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have to make sure that the organizations that we support are serving disadvantaged people and communities. That's that Justice 40 requirement. We're limited to how much funding we can offer as part of the program, up to $200,000 per building. We may not spend that much on every building, but that's the limit that we're able to spend. I will say that there is a matching requirement, 20% match, but we were fortunate in getting support from 4 area foundations. So we're not asking any of the nonprofit organizations to come up with match for the program. So we have Hall Family Foundation, the Marion and Henry Block Charitable Foundation, the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, and the Sunderland Foundation are the 4 foundations that have generously agreed to support our program. There are certain environmental and historic preservation requirements that DOE has outlined, and so we're going to make sure that we can meet those. I think if somebody maybe wants to mute, we want to make sure that the nonprofits we work with are able to be a subrecipient for federal funds, and so one of the DOE requirements is that all of our selected nonprofits have to be registered in the federal program sam.gov. And if your organization has not, and if you are selected, you would need to be registered prior to being able to participate. We are hopeful that we'll find a number of good small organizations that may not have the fiscal capacity or the organizational capacity to be a subrecipient. And so Mark and Community Capital Fund are possibly could provide kind of fiscal support, service fiscal agent on behalf of some small organizations so that they would be able to benefit from this program. And then finally, DOE has said that their goal and our goal is to achieve at least a 15% energy savings on every building that we support. We're hoping we might be able to do more, and certain improvements are going to probably get us further with energy savings. So I mentioned that we formed a community advisory board a little earlier this spring. We invited neighborhood residents, some local government staff, some funders, and individuals who have expertise in the built environment, buildings, and energy conservation. And so we've met with that board several times. they've helped us in identifying nonprofits for outreach, and they have helped us with designing the selection criteria. And they will be involved in reviewing the applications and helping us with that selection process. So there's a pretty broad range of improvements that are eligible under the program, and there's more information about that on our website. But in general, it is more the conventional energy conservation improvements. We can't do solar, but there's a lot that we can do to improve existing buildings. And the ones that tend to show the greatest energy savings are installing LED lighting, more efficient heating and cooling systems, and energy system controls to control the energy use within buildings. There are other eligible improvements like windows and doors and roofs, and some of your organizations may offer food pantries or congregate meal support and have large refrigeration or freezer units in your buildings that are using a lot of energy. So those would be types of improvements. We can do above ground heat pumps. One of the environmental requirements that we're gonna make sure we are able to meet is that we can't disturb any ground. So we can't do any below ground. We can't remove trees or other things that would disturb ground. It would require a lot more in the way of review by the federal agency. Here's a little bit about our grant timeline. The Department of Energy announced the grant last October. We're frankly still waiting for the final grant agreement, but we've been given authorization to proceed. We set an application deadline of August 23rd, and then between the 23rd and September 9th, our plan is to work with our partners and some of our community advisory board members to review all of the applications that come in and make sure that all of the applicants are eligible, the buildings are eligible, that we've got the information that we need in order to sort of review the requests and be able to consider them as part of our process. We're expecting that we're going to be able to assist 25 to 30 nonprofit buildings through this process. And then during the month of September, we have 4 organizations that are going to help us work with you and other nonprofits to look at your current energy use and what you have identified as potential projects. We might identify some others, but sort of do either an energy assessment or a level 1 energy audit to identify the potential areas for energy savings. And then during October, our community advisory board is going to review the applications, the energy assessment or audit information, and will identify those top 25 to 30 buildings. Then we're going to confirm that we can achieve the energy savings that we are hoping for with buildings that are selected, and we'll do a more in-depth level 2 energy audit on those buildings. And then assuming that they do demonstrate energy savings, we're going to prepare a portfolio of those buildings to be submitted to the Department of Energy. During October and November, we're also going to be identifying if there are any projects that do require special review for NEPA or historic preservation requirements. And so we're expecting, the process is a long one, but we're expecting that by the end of November and through maybe January of next year, we'll be working with the selected nonprofits on contracts, bid documents, and cost estimates for bidding, and then in that first quarter of next year to execute contracts and kind of support the bidding and contractor selection process. We have 3 years for this grant, and so this year is kind of our first year. The second year, 2025, will allow us to work with the selected nonprofits to complete the bidding, contracting, and construction work. And then we'll have a year after that for measurement and valuation to be able to demonstrate to the Department of Energy that the improvements made are achieving energy savings. So the application is on the MARC website. It's a portal, and so you can begin the process, and if you need to step away, you'll be able to go back. It'll send you a link once you close out the application if you haven't yet submitted it, and you'll be able to go back and either make changes or to complete the rest of the application. We do have a PDF of the application if you want to review it ahead of time to kind of assemble your information to make it easier to fill out. And we estimate if you've collected the information you need, it shouldn't take you more than about an hour to fill out the application online. So I'll just go through kind of the questions that are asked in the application. We want the name of your organization, and we'd like you to upload a copy of your IRS 501c3 letter. And a requirement of the Department of Energy is that the name of your organization that's on the IRS letter, the name of the organization that's registered in sam.gov, and the name of the organization that is on your title of owning the building all have to be the same name. And that's a DOE requirement. So we're going to be asking for that information toward the start of the application. We'd like to know the year that your 501c3 was approved, although we know it'll be on the letter that you'll be uploading. We'd like to know a little bit about your organization and who you serve and the kinds of programs and services you deliver. So that's question number 6. It doesn't have to be lengthy answers, but we'd like to we and our advisory board would like to know more about your organization and the programs and services you deliver. We are serving a 9-county Kansas City metro area, but you may have a focus on a particular neighborhood or county or city, and so kind of giving us a sense of the area you serve, and then an estimate of the number of clients that you've served in the past year. Some organizations have multiple buildings through which they provide services. So we're interested in also number 7, understanding the specific programs and services that are offered in the building that you are proposing for improvements. And I will tell you that if you have more than one building that you'd like to have considered for this application, we need separate applications for each building. We also want to understand the need, and the Department of Energy has said we need to demonstrate that there's the need for financial support for this program for all of the organizations we assist. So we're asking you to help us demonstrate that need and what you see as the possible benefits to your organization. And then we have a question, just your total operating budget and the percent you spend on electric and gas utilities. So this next set of information is more about the building that you want supported. So the name of the building owner as shown on the title and the building address. And there may be certain organizations that don't want to disclose publicly their location, like a domestic violence shelter. And so we have a place where you could check a box if you don't want us to disclose your location publicly. We'd like to know the age of your building or the year built. The historic preservation requirements say if it's more than 45 years of age or older, we need to kind of confirm with the state historic preservation office that we don't have to do any special construction considerations for your building. We can't serve buildings that are in the 100-year floodplain. So that's question 14. And then we have, we'd like to know in question 15, how many total square feet is your building, the number of rooms, and the number of stories. So trying to get a feel for your building. And then the type of property, whether it's maybe it's an old school or it's an office building, it might be a homeless shelter. So kind of giving us an idea of the type of property. And if you're not sure, there's an other category and you could just describe it. Some building owners share their space with others. So if you have other users in your building, we'd like to know that. And if they're renting space or if they're just part of your overall operation. We want to know how much use your building gets. Churches are eligible, many or faith-based organizations, and some provide social services, but a good part of the week, they may not have their building being in use. And so we want an idea of the hours of operation for your programs and services and the number of people, not so much clients, but your staff or volunteers that are in the building on an average day, number of computers in use. And then if you have a food pantry or meal service operation, there's some questions about what you offer and a little bit about the equipment that you use. Then we are wanting some information about your systems, who your utility providers are for heating and cooling, what kind of heating system you have, cooling system, hot water, ventilation, and if you have an energy control system. And we're trying to get a feel for what kind of system you have, the age of your system, and then question 29 is really if you have any particular concerns or issues about your systems. Maybe it's the age, maybe it's maintenance issues, maybe it's high energy use. So that would be a place where you could help us understand a bit about your systems where there's a need for replacement. And then we also want to understand your interior lighting. We know that LED lighting can be particularly helpful with energy savings. So we want to understand your lighting systems. Might tell us a bit about your roof and its age. And then if you have any prior energy audits over the past 5 years, if you wouldn't mind providing us a copy, there's a place to upload those. And that will help us to kind of understand your building and its energy use and potential for improvements. If you have had any assessment of improvements needed that maybe weren't in an audit or a formal assessment, but you identified maybe through repairs or whatever that you needed some improvements, that would be helpful to know. And then we'd like to get your last 12 months of energy use and costs for the use. And if you have more than 1 meter in serving the building, we'd need it for all of your meters or all of your use. And then the last questions are really sort of yes, no, but we want to ask you whether you feel you have the operational and financial capacity to work with us to manage the project if you're funded, if you've had any experience in receiving and managing federal funds in the past, and then if you agree to maintain ownership and help us in providing utility information for at least 12 months after the construction is completed. We have some tools on our website that could support your work and kind of helping us look at areas of our region where there are larger proportions of disadvantaged residents. And so that's the Justice 40 areas, and there's a couple mapping tools that you might utilize that might help you in determining whether your building is in one of those areas. And while much of the urban core areas of central Kansas City, Missouri, and eastern Kansas City, Kansas are considered disadvantaged, there are areas throughout the region where there are larger percentages. And we also, we want to serve the entire metro area. And so there may be areas where they aren't considered necessarily disadvantaged, but the populations you serve would qualify you as being eligible. And then we want to really thank the Metropolitan Energy Center, who's allowing us to have you make use of their Energy Star portfolio manager software. And they're offering a couple training sessions, one on July the 17th and one on August the 5th. And on our website, there's a link for registering for those trainings. And those might assist you. And by going through that, you could then use the Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and it'd be a way to help you in benchmarking your energy use and begin to identify potential areas for energy savings. I'll talk a little bit about selection criteria. The Community Advisory Board identified 4 areas that we're going to be focusing on as we look at your application. One is location, and I mentioned we're going to be looking at areas where there are concentrations of disadvantaged residents, but also looking across the metro area to make sure that if there are pockets of disadvantaged residents that are served by organizations such as yours, that we're able to offer this program as well. We're going to be looking at the need, so what programs are delivered, the use of the building, the number of clients served, whether your budget is limited or you have high energy costs, so that this program would serve up an important need in reducing the amount of funds you have to spend on utilities versus dollars that you could repurpose for serving your clients. And then we want sort of a willingness that you're going to maintain ownership once the investment is made. The 2 other areas for selection, one is organizational capacity, and then the second or the fourth one is energy savings, and that will be through the energy assessments or audits that we'll perform, that we feel that we can help you in achieving at least a 15% energy savings through the investments. Some additional criteria. We talked with the advisory board about the types of organizations that we're able to support, and so a broad range of social service agencies, domestic violence and homeless shelters, emergency assistance providers, childcare providers. If an organization is in a disadvantaged neighborhood, we will consider arts organizations, libraries, healthcare, and workforce development. For faith-based organizations that provide social services, at least 51% of the space has to be dedicated for social services. Just because of the potential demand and the limited resources we have, we're not at this time going to be considering K through 12 education or college and universities, animal shelters. And then we've talked a lot about housing, and while there's a need, we feel like we can't, with this program, address single family and multi-unit housing buildings. So if a emergency shelter or domestic violence shelter has the utility management is through central systems rather than each apartment or unit having a separate meter and controlled by the tenant. We would be able to support those types of buildings. And that's something, if you have a question on that, we might be able to provide more guidance on those kinds of buildings. There are a number of federal terms and conditions. For those of you that have received federal funds in the past, they're pretty standard. The SAM.gov registration is required. E-Verify is more of a Missouri requirement, but it's that everyone who is employed by your organization is eligible to work in the United States. Doesn't mean they have to be a citizen. It just means they have to be eligible to work. There is a debarment certification that your organization's not been debarred from federal programs. There's a prohibition against substance abuse, and that your organization has a drug-free workplace policy. And we have examples if your organization doesn't have one, but would like a simple one to adopt. The Department of Energy has a requirement to buy America products, but they're working with us to make sure that, in particular, heating and cooling systems, there may not be much on the market and available that is totally American made. So we may have a waiver from that requirement for some of the products that might be needed. Davis-Bacon just requires us and you, as if you're selected, to make sure that all of the workers on site are paid a living wage. And there's actually a website, a portal that the Department of Energy wants us to use to go on site, interview the workers, and be able to document that what the contractor has said they are paying their workers is what they are paying them. There are some insurance requirements to protect all of us because of construction. It is a reimbursement grant. And so I mentioned for small organizations, Mark or Community Capital Fund may need to step in and be helpful to make sure that from a cash flow standpoint, that organizations can participate. I would say that Mark has a pretty good track record of being responsive in reimbursing our subrecipients quickly for expenses. We'd like you to be willing to allow for site visits or participate in meetings. And we can only use the funds for construction and equipment and not on your administrative or staff costs. And so here's some of our folks and their email addresses. But with that, I'll see if we have any questions. Or I might ask if Ashley, Andrew, Beth, others have anything you'd like to add.
I think you covered it really great, Marlene. And I'm not seeing any questions in the chat right now, so I'll let others chime in if they have questions. Feel free to unmute yourself.
I do have a question. We have never applied or received federal grants before. And so when it comes to, like, what kind of capacity are you talking about? I have no idea. We're a small staff operation. So when you say the word capacity, I have no idea what that means.
Okay. Well, and we do have a kind of a checklist that we're developing on making sure that a subrecipient would kind of understand the requirements. But in general, it's two-part. One is sort of the fiscal management, that you're able to, account for, segregate the funds, and be able to report on the expenditures. But then in terms of operations, being able to go through a bidding and contracting process. You've probably made improvements to your building, maybe without federal funds, maybe with foundation dollars. But but your ability to do that, and again, the sort of the caveat for this grant, it's a reimbursement grant. A lot of public grants are, as opposed to foundation funds, where usually they come at least partially, at the beginning of a process rather than, and so again, we might work with you to, if that's a concern you would have about the cash flow challenges. But the other would be staffing to make sure that, you're able to manage a construction project. So whether it's working with the contractor, that the Davis-Bacon requirements require somebody other than the contractor has to go on site and interview the workers to make sure they are being paid a fair wage, and then helping to document that for the Department of Energy. Those are kind of the main things, Sylvia, that I think are important. And if you've not received federal funds before, and the SAM.gov registration is a pretty easy one. And and when you register, it's good for a year, and then you just, apply for renewal. But it's something that many, both for-profit and nonprofit companies and organizations apply for, and then they are then eligible to apply for federal funds and receive them. So,
Thanks, Marlene.
sure.
Yes, this is my name's Stan Baird, and I'm a special project consultant with the Full Employment Council. The question I have is that what resource is available if I just wanted someone to do a walkthrough with me to do an assessment? I know there's several needs for this building, but what resource would be available prior to submitting the application that I could have an assessment of what they feel would be the best needs for this building?
So I will say that Evergy, which is one of the organizations that has agreed to assist us with energy assessments, if you're in their service area,
Okay.
they are helping small businesses and nonprofits with to kind of look at energy assessments, and so we can get you that information if you want to contact them directly. I will say that once the application deadline passes, we will, assuming your application is that you're eligible, then we'll assign either one of the engineering firms or Evergy, or possibly others to walk through the building with you, look at your prior energy use and energy and your heating and cooling and lighting and other systems, and be able to help you identify those areas where they think you might achieve the most energy savings.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I'll just echo what Marlene said earlier about MEC helping get your information in Energy Star portfolio. That's a good first step, is just to be able to evaluate what your utility bills look like over time, and just have that data as a starting point, and then the walkthrough is the next logical step.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I will say that while we will not likely be able to help every organization that applies, going through the Energy Star portfolio system and getting at least a level 1 or an energy assessment report, every organization will receive that, and so that will be of benefit. We expect there will be some other grant opportunities in the coming year or years on energy conservation, and so for organizations that haven't looked at this in detail, it could be a useful tool to help you in applying. And even if we're able to help with some improvements, there may be others that down the road, the information will be useful to you in submitting a request either for public funds or private funds.
Okay. So if I'm following this correctly, the initial application will basically determine if you qualify for assistance. And then after that, we'll determine how much you'll be able to get based on that assessment.
Right. I mean, the Community Advisory Board is going to help us look at all of the eligible applicants and the energy assessments that we'll do, and then they will make a selection of the 25 to 30 to be assisted.
Okay.
Through that energy assessment or first level audit, we'll get a feel for what improvements might be most appropriate for this
Okay.
program for your building and what kind of energy savings we might be able to achieve. And our engineers in particular are going to help us with estimating costs. So we have some idea of, are we talking about $100,000 worth of improvements or maybe more, to where we have to set priorities.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Can we, hi, Marlene.
Hi, Dennis.
Great presentation. I'm looking at that portfolio manager. Is that something that we can do ourselves, or do we need to contract with someone to do that with us or for us?
You should be able to do it yourself, and I would really recommend the training. It's from 10 to 11:15 each of those 2 days. It's the same training, but just delivered twice. And Metropolitan Energy Center does have some customer service representatives. So if you are going through the software system after the training and you have a question or you need some help, they've said they'll be available to kind of troubleshoot or answer questions as you go along.
Great.
If I could step in here for a minute, Marlene.
Sure.
Great presentation. Just a quick question. Do you have a low number that you're trying to, how do I put this? You come to somebody and somebody only wants $1,000, or it works out that it'll only be $1,000. Is that something that is out of bounds, or do you have some guidelines on that? I know you've got a $200,000 ceiling, but do you have a lower one, a floor?
We don't have a minimum, Mike. I think we want to make sure that, we spend the right amount of dollars to help you achieve at least a 15% energy savings for the dollar spent. And so let's say your organization has already replaced your HVAC system, you have a new roof, maybe you would benefit by some LED lighting in certain parts of your building that have the old fluorescent lighting. And that may not be a big expense, but it would achieve a significant energy savings. So
Okay.
I don't know if that helps you to.
Yeah, no, it's just that I represent a Lutheran church, and yes, all of the above, air conditioning, fluorescent lighting, all of it kind of falls in the category. I just don't, some projects you kind of pinned 25 to 30 buildings in your presentation. So if you've got if you want to spend that much money within that many buildings, I just wondered if you had a floor. Okay. Thank you very much, Marlene.
Sure.
This is kind of a technical question, and I'm not, we may be one of the very few agencies that have this situation, but our building is owned by us, so that we have title to the building, but the land under it, the land that it sits on, belongs to the university, and we have a 100-year contract. Would that still pass the title test, so to speak?
I would say that it probably will. I would be happy to ask DOE to give us guidance specifically on that, but I think they are interested in getting as many buildings improved as possible. And so I think they would want to make sure that once the building is improved, that it's able to be maintained for the services that you all are, providing to the community. And if you have a long-term lease, then on the land. But let me check that for you, Dennis, just to make sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Uh-huh. We had an earlier information webinar that was kind of identical information to this. We did have a number of questions that we tried to answer. So there's a Q&A posted on our website from that first one. One thing I think we might mention is that there is a tax credit for nonprofit organizations, which sounds strange, but it's for energy improvements. And so if that's something that you would be interested in, I think Ashley could help get us connected. I think in the Q&A, we mentioned a website that could help with that information.
I'll put that information in the chat, Marlene. So that's specific for solar. If you're looking to do solar, since this grant won't cover solar, but it's a great pairing to add solar to once you get your energy efficiency. So it becomes a pass through. It's essentially a direct pay to nonprofits as opposed to a tax credit. So it's a pretty unique opportunity. They haven't had this in the past. So I'll send some information for everyone. And if anybody has questions on that, I'm not an expert on it, but I can find who can give you more information.
Thanks. And Catherine put the link to our Q&A document also in the chat from that first webinar. The other is Evergy has said they do have some incentives for improvements, and they'll make that information available to us to share with those of you that are Evergy customers. Well, if after today you, as you're going through the application or you're thinking more about this program, you have questions that come up, please feel free to contact us, and we're happy to try and get you the answer as quickly as we can.
Marlene, I'll add just something real quick. This is Andrew Davidson Community Capital Fund. This application is extensive, and just in our experience, sometimes people with grant opportunities maybe wait until the last minute or kind of, a week before. This is not that type of opportunity to kind of wait. If you are remotely interested, I would start as soon as you possibly can with your team, because there's a lot of information that is being asked of your organization to get in the door. And so do not wait. If you are interested or if you have questions, do not delay. The deadline is towards the end of next month. And so definitely jump on it and do not wait.
And I'll just add to that, there's a lot of expertise that's kind of wrapped around this. So please take advantage of our email addresses that are provided. I have a background in architecture, as does Beth. We have a lot of expertise in serving nonprofits with federal funding. We have a new project manager that will be joining on at Mark next week, who has experience in bidding and contracting, who will be through the process, but could certainly help in this early application phase. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And as we said, Metropolitan Energy Center can walk you through the Energy Star portfolio to get your data updated. So because this is kind of a unique program, we haven't done this before, we really provided a lot of subject matter expertise to wrap around it to help everyone through the process. So please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, on behalf of Mark and our partners, I want to thank all of you for the good work you do in serving the community. and for your interest in this program. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the coming weeks. And again, as Ashley said, and Andrew, if we can be helpful to you, please don't hesitate to call on us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.